right, ladies and gentlemen, cats and dogs, strangers and neighbors, thank you for tuning in to the Richard Beamer Radio Hour. Today I'll be touching on the modern phenomena of cloud computing, how it works, how it's grown, and what it might look like tomorrow. So diving right into it, here's the Google definition of cloud computing: the practice of using a network of remote servers hosted on the internet to store, manage, and process data, rather than a local server or personal computer. Knowledge of cloud computing. This might seem like a bit of gibberish, but in simplified terms, or spots and data processing by tapping to a bunch of different servers through the internet. If you look at the image on this slide, it illustrates the interconnectivity that devices share when taking part in the cloud. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at what's going on inside of that cloud. With this graphic, the cloud is a little less esoteric, and we can see how it breaks down. So the client's computer, which would be your computer, connects to the cloud through the central control node, which widens your periphery of connection dramatically. From this, data will be stored in remote databases, and information can be shared almost instantaneously through other servers. Now that we have a general understanding of what cloud computing is, let's peek at the history of this technology. Starting off, we hear the first mention of something similar to cloud computing when JCR Licklider, boy, what a name, a member of the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, suggests building an intergalactic computer network in 1969. Over the course of the next 2 decades, we see the creation of email and the World Wide Web. And then 10 years later, Salesforce.com offers the first formal cloud computing service when they delivered enterprise applications via a simple website. Now, it didn't take long for other companies to jump on board, and in 2002, Amazon released Amazon Web Services, which was used for storage, computation, and the Mechanical Turk, a human intelligence application. Now, just a little farther down the line, an Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud is built for small companies to rent computers for their own applications. We'll dive into this a little later, but this is one of the first infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, arrangements. And today, we're continuing to step away from localized storage and computing. With the continued rapid growth of the internet, consumers and businesses will continue to be more able to seamlessly dive into and share the wealth of knowledge and resources available today. Now that we have a grounding with what cloud computing is, let's take a look at how consumers and businesses utilize this technology. For most consumers, a public cloud computing platform will be used. This is a program that exists outside of the client's firewall, and the cloud service provider controls the infrastructure of the system. Now, with businesses, they tend to use private cloud computing platforms. The key difference is that the business maintains control over sensitive data within a firewall for increased privacy and security. Now, diving a little bit more into different cloud computing services, here are the 3 key options that are typically available. These are 1, infrastructure as a service, 2, platform as a service, and 3, software as a service. Let's go ahead and dive into those a little bit more as well. This chart does an excellent job of comparing the trio. Starting with software as a service, businesses can subscribe to an application it uses on the internet, which really means that they can rent anything they might need for cloud computing. The next step down is platform as a service, and it's similar to software as a service, but leaves out hosted apps. Then finally, we're left with infrastructure as a service, and this is simply servers, storage, firewalls for security, and a physical data storage center. Now, to dissect cloud computing a little bit further, let's peep through a more historical lens. One of the first advances towards greater connectivity was the advent of grid computing. To say it in the simplest way possible, imagine hooking up a whole bunch of computers to one central control node. Then with that, you kind of create a web, and with this web of computers, an artificial supercomputer is born that can handle extremely complex computation problems. The downside is that if one computer goes down, the whole system could crash. Now, in addition to that, this arrangement is extremely inefficient with small workloads. And moving on to another advancement and how technology is used is utility computing. Similar to paying normal utilities like water, electric, or gas, computer services like hardware, software, or network bandwidth can be rented at an on-demand basis. This metered service is very efficient because it kicks in only when it's needed. To conceptualize this, imagine you really needed some data for your iPhone, but because you used up all your data plan way too early in the month, like none of us have ever done that before. But to resolve this, you ask your friend if they could turn on their Wi-Fi hotspot. Now, if your friend decided to charge you a metered rate to use their Wi-Fi hotspot, then this would be similar to utility computing. Now, both utility and grid computing sometimes make up the whole of cloud computing. Just imagine the aggregate of cloud computing being more of an encompassing topic that utility and grid computing fit into, even though they existed way before cloud computing. So clearly, there's a ton of information within the topic of cloud computing, but let's consider some of the highlights. Number one, the applications and data are accessible anytime, anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are on the planet. If you can hook up to the internet, you can hook up to your apps. Second, the cost of hardware and software decreases for companies. So previously, they would have had to buy a lot more of the database equipment or the proper software for each employee that they hired, but through this, they can just rent that service through cloud computing companies. Third, less space is taken up by all those bulky database or hardware pieces. Fourth, money is saved on IT support. And then 5, it's much faster processing. Now, as monumental as this has been for the modern world, there are still some concerns associated with cloud computing. Here are just a handful. Of course, the 2 big ones would be concerns with privacy and security, but one lesser known issue would be ownership of data. So if a company were to use a cloud computing service and store their information in the database offered by this service, it is unclear whether or not the company offering cloud computing owns it or the company that originally sent in that data owns it. And it's currently under debate between professionals, lawyers, and universities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. You've almost finished listening to someone who knows nothing about cloud computing tell you everything about cloud computing. But before we call it a day, there are just a few more points I'd like to make. We've talked a lot about what cloud computing is, but let's take a gander at a few real-life examples. So iCloud, Google, and Dropbox are all prime examples of the almighty cloud computing. Now, all this info is fine and dandy, but who cares about what's fine and dandy? The importance of this is determined by how it will impact the future. Now, I'm no fortune teller, but I think we're going to see some major advancements in the near future. I'm talking beam me up, Scotty, mumbo jumbo within the or so. We could even see artificial intelligence being applied to cloud computing to support and maintain itself. Eventually, we'd see a blend between public and private clouds through a hybrid cloud interface. And for all those financial wizards out there, the cloud computing industry is expected to hit a value of $205 billion. Yes, that is with a B, and that'd be by 2020. So, you made it to the end. Thank you for listening all the way through, and I hope you learned something from this presentation. Thank you.